Okay, I think it's time to start on Unit 4. Okay, I think I'm recording. Yes. Okay. Let me stop this. We are sharing. Okay, does everybody see my screen with the Unit 4?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. The FEMA 480 guidance document that's on that ASFPM website that basically covers all the information in these presentations and what you should be using to study for. That Unit 4 covers much of what was covered in the previous presentation, how to use the flood insurance reports, how to use the flood maps and profiles. But what this unit is going to focus on are the letters of map change. So it's the topic of, this is the topic of revising the flood maps. In addition to that, this unit will cover the elevation certificate. No map is perfect and no flood situation is static. And from time to time, FEMA and communities or individuals, property owners might find it necessary for a firm or floodway map to be updated, corrected, or changed. Listed on this slide are common reasons why a map may need to be changed. In 2016, Mile High Flood District adopted the NOAA 14 Atlas, so that would be an example of updated hydrology. Also, hydraulic information may change. There may be bridges or culverts that were installed. There may have been channelization that occurred, or levees may have been built. Additionally, new LiDAR information may provide better ground elevation data. And in the case of Zone A that we were just talking about, those can be replaced with a more detailed studies. Only FEMA can actually amend or change the flood insurance studies and rate maps, but anybody can request that FEMA amend or change them. And the NFIP maps are vital to effective enforcement of your floodplain management responsibilities. And as such, only FEMA can amend them. But since they can't do it alone, community involvement is absolutely necessary to maintain the accuracy and adequate control over the quality of the maps. Because the change amends or revises the map, it is a public record that the community must maintain. So any low max should be noted on the community's master flood maps and filed by panel location in that's accessible. FEMA has 4 approaches to changing the maps. A restudy, where a new flood insurance study or some portion of the old study is updated. Limited map maintenance project, that's a smaller scale restudy that's limited in size. It's usually used for studies in unnumbered A zones. An amendment is used to remove an area that was inadvertently included in the special flood hazard areas. Often the ground is higher than depicted on the base map used for the flood map. This typically happens because the floodplain boundary on the topographic map is generalized. More detailed ground elevation data can be used to amend the firm to show particular properties in that used to amend the firm to show a particular property is higher than the base flood elevation and therefore outside of the special flood hazard area. And finally, revisions are scientifically based challenges to the flood elevations to incorporate new data that became effective after the construction of a flood control project. It also Revisions can also be used to reflect fill placed in the floodplain after flood study is currently in effect. And finally, to change the floodplain or floodway boundaries. Yeah. The rest of this unit will focus on the last 2 of those methodologies, the amendments and the revisions. Okay. LOMAs, or letters of map amendment. They're the simple changes involving individual lots or structures. It could be seen as similar to correcting a clerical error. LOMARs, based on fill, those are for properties elevated by the placement of fill. CLOMARs are FEMA's comment on a proposed project that would change the floodway, base flood elevation, or the floodplain boundaries. And letters of map changes are changes to the floodplain, letters of map revision are changes to the floodplain due to new construction and involve changes to a previously established floodway or base flood elevation or floodplain boundary. If you want a map change to reflect a new study that has already been done, you use, or to reflect better ground elevation, use one of the following FEMA forms. Either the MT1 form, which are appropriate to letters of map amendment or conditional letters of map amendment. MT1 forms are also used for letters of map revision based on fill. MT2 forms are for the letters of map revision, conditional letters of map revision, or PMRs. I'm not sure that's accurate. I'll have to look into that.
What's the question?
Do you guys know if MT2 forms are used for PMRs?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, they can be. It just depends on how many panels are being changed.
Okay. There's one form here that's not mentioned, and that's a MTEZ, and that's for a letter of map amendment on a LOMA for a single lot. Similarly, the MTEZ form can be used for letters of map revision based on fill for a single lot. Here's an example of the MTEZ application. That's probably way too difficult to read, so I won't go into the details there.
Chris, we have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
The MTEZ forms, there's no charge for those?
Correct,
Is there a fee? Okay, no fee.
correct. Lomas are free. Loma Fs, there is a fee because we have to look at some hydrology on that. We have to look at how much fill is in there, how was it compacted, things like this. So it's going to require an engineer to look at it. So there's a fee. It's less than $500 for that.
Thank you, Diana.
Mhm.
Another question, why is a Loma F an amendment when revision is in the name?
Because it's for a single lot.
Thank you.
Okay, here's the MT1 application form. Again, these are for clomas, lomas, loma fill, and clomer fills. Okay. Letters of map revision requirements. When is it required? Any change, an increase or a decrease in the base flood elevation resulting from a physical change, and any requests that change the floodway, properties that are in alluvial fans, and changes in coastal high hazard areas. Okay, it revises the effective map to show changes in the base flood elevations, floodplains, and floodways. The firms and flood insurance report itself are not republished, but annotated maps, profiles, and tables are attached to a letter. Here we're going to go into the components of LOMR. You have an effective map. You go through the process of analyzing the flood source and determining new floodplain boundaries. Then you annotate that firm. You also take the original profiles and revise them to show the new elevations. So here we have a cover letter that is addressed to the community leaders. That could be a mayor or board of commissioners. The determination document that has the community information and the project description, whether a new bridge was put in or some other physical change that occurred. It describes it in this document. Also, you have the annotated firm, as well as the annotated tables and profile. Okay, I think I previously mentioned that clomers are FEMA's comment on the effects that a proposed project would have on the firm. Clomers do not change the maps themselves. These conditional letters inform the builder and others, such as like bank financing the project, that when the project is complete, it will qualify for a letter of map revision.
And that has to be filed within 6 months of the project completion.
Right. And I don't believe there are expiration dates for clomers.
Correct.
Okay, clomer, when is a clomer required? Any activity that modifies the floodway by causing an increase in the base flood discharges in the regulatory floodways or more than 1 foot in any portion of the special flood hazard area if no regulatory floodway is designated. But yeah, basically any encroachment in the floodway that causes any kind of increase, then a CLOMAR is required, or any kind of encroachment where the floodplain, when a floodway has not been established and causes an increase of greater than 1 foot. This slide mentions that Colorado has a higher standard, and that's 1/2 foot. What is an increase? There are several analyses required when doing a CLOMAR. You'll be comparing the effective information, but that effective information may not reflect existing conditions. So when you're doing your comparisons, you're going to be comparing a corrected, effective, or existing conditions and the post-project conditions model.
Chris, we've got a couple of good questions in the chat room. So is a CLOMAR needed as a precursor to a LOMAR?
In some instances, yes. It's important that FEMA and the community have an opportunity to review the proposed changes before they occur.
And is a CLOMAR also needed when encroaching on the floodplain that has a floodway?
Yes.
Okay. And then, so can a developer use an as-built data for a LOMAR if the local community allows floodplain permitting post-design stage?
I'm not sure I understood that question.
So that's a question from Marta. Can you unmute Marta? And
All right, hold on.
okay.
I'll try.
So one of the key words in this is existing and anticipated. When doing a CLOMAR, you have to look at the anticipated, not just the existing.
Marta, can you restate
Unmute.
your question?
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I guess I was asking if as-built data can be used to submit a LOMAR. If, again, the local community, the floodplain permitting maybe lasts a year and the project is supposed to be built within that time. So if they pre-approve floodplain permitting and then the as-built data changes that, can they use that as-built data, the developer, to submit that LOMAR, or does it have to be the design that's approved and does not cause, increases in flooding?
No, you're required to provide as-built data for your LOMAR application.
So if the project hasn't been built yet, you can use design data, but if it
No,
it's in
the as-built data is always after the construction is completed.
right, but if the construction hasn't been completed, can the LOMAR still be submitted, or does it always have to be after?
A LOMAR is always after. So if there's an increase in the base flood more than a foot in the floodplain, or there's a rise in the floodway, a CLOMAR is required before construction starts.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
Right.
And a nuance on Caitlin's earlier question, tying into what Diana just said, if someone is filling in the flood fringe, technically a CLOMAR is not required at that point. It's when they go into the floodway and you don't achieve a no rise, which will be covered in a later unit. that a clomer must be done. So, and I've had developers play that game with me, where they're filling around the fringe, and it actually was a property that hadn't annexed into our city yet. I refused to endorse it. If the county wanted to continue with the project, fine, because it wasn't, they weren't looking at what the ultimate property development was going to be. They were just wanting to do some filling around the fringe.
So you also have to look, and you also have to look at, is that what the community has to keep in mind is that development and any anticipated development going to increase the base flood elevation either by a foot in the floodplain or at all in the floodway? So, you know, you as a floodplain administrator, you need to look and see, okay, well, what is being developed? So if you've got several projects that are going on at the same time, you have to look at who is going to cause the rise. And they're the ones that have to produce the clomer.
Okay. All right. Roles and responsibilities of the communities. Is to meet the standard of section 60.3. They're required to ensure that permits are given for all proposed development. I think I stated that wrong. They're required to have a permit process for all proposed development and ensure that building sites are reasonably safe from flooding. Structures have to be elevated above the base flood elevation and prohibit encroachment in the AE zones. That'll increase the base flood elevations more than 1 foot. Again, Colorado has a higher standard. And prohibit encroachment in the floodway. Okay. Here's some more roles and responsibilities of communities. They're basically ensuring or making people safe from flooding. Maintenance of channels is also important, so that the model conditions still apply. And that includes removal of accumulated debris and vegetation control. There's one example that I know of. The city of San Buenaventura in 1997 was denied a disaster grant to fix a ditch because damages to the ditch were due to a lack of maintenance of that ditch prior to the disaster. Communities have to assure that flood carrying capacity of any alternative water courses is maintained. That's basic maintenance. Okay. Okay, amendments. Basis for the amendments. Inadvertent inclusion in the floodplain. Okay, we're talking about amendments now. It's basically showing that you're above the base flood elevation. Here's an interesting line. The amendments in V zones cannot be processed, so there's no process to get yourself out of a coastal V zone. Here's a graphical depiction about of a house above the base flood elevation. If it were mapped in the special flood hazard area, then this house would qualify for a LOMA. On the left-hand side, you see a house that's correctly shown in the floodplain, and the house on the right was inadvertently included, and it can be taken out by a LOMA. Part 70 of the NFIP regulations requires that the lowest ground touching the structure be equal to or higher than the base flood elevation. Here's an example of a loamer that's based on fill. Again, that the same kind of figure is shown, where the left side is showing a house correctly shown in the floodplain, and the house on the right was elevated by fill. Okay. If a structure is involved, lowest adjacent grade in the lowest floor greater than the base flood elevation, or the 1% annual chance flood elevation. The community.
Actually,
Go ahead, Diana.
that's a little misleading. It's if the lowest adjacent grade is equal to or greater than the base flood elevation, the loma or the lomer will be, the structure will be removed from the floodplain. We don't look at the lowest floor.
Okay. So that needs to be updated.
Yeah, yeah. So you can get a loma or a lomer F, remove the structure from the floodplain and dig a basement. And it's still going to be outside of the floodplain. We don't like that, but that's the way we do it right now.
Except in Colorado. That's not allowed in Colorado by the CWCB rules. And a Lomer F does not revise the outline of the floodplain. It will say that a building or a building site is above the base flood elevation. So in that regard, it's similar to a letter of map amendment. It says this structure, this site is no longer in the floodplain, but it doesn't revise the outline of the flood map. So
Right.
You need to maintain that document, both as the community and the property owner needs to maintain that document. As soon as they go in to refinance their loan, they're going to be told they're in the floodplain, and they'll say, nope, I've got this Loma or this Lomer F that says I am not. But the reason the mapping isn't revised is because the hydraulic study hasn't been done. So you've raised your site above the base flood elevation, but no one's done a revised hydraulic study that confirms upstream, downstream at the location what the mapping now looks like.
Right. Yeah, and community involvement is critical, and that's why there's a community acknowledgement of fill form that needs to be completed as well. And this is the example of that, and it includes the community number and property name and address. It includes information about the fill. Okay, here's a little information about the finished floor versus the lowest adjacent grade. Approvals for Lomer fills are based on the lowest adjacent grade. However, local regulations require finished floor to be at or above the base flood elevation also, and the community is responsible for certifying this. Finished floor for approval of Lomer F is typically your first finished floor. However, if you have a crawl space, it is the top of that crawl space. And flood insurance policies will be rated differently, and the rates depend on the finished floor, not the lowest adjacent grade. And this is repeating what I said earlier. Lomas are determined by the lowest adjacent grade. In V zones, comparisons to the base flood elevations are made against the lowest horizontal member, the bottom of the lowest horizontal member. All right, this is the portion of the unit that goes into the elevation certificate. It is an administrative tool of the NFIP. Um, it's a requirement to certify the elevations of buildings so that the policy can be rated properly. This provides documentation to verify the community's enforcement of its building ordinances. The elevation certificate acts as the community's proof that they are holding up their end of the deal when they join the NFIP. Elevation certificate is used to certify the buildings. That's what I just mentioned. It requires properly rate post-firm buildings. Provides a way for communities to record compliance. Okay. Does not provide a waiver of insurance purchase requirements. Only a LOMA or LOMR based on FIL can remove the federal mandate for insurance requirements. A separate certificate is required for flood proofing, and that's only applicable for non-residential buildings. And residential buildings for communities that have an exemption, and those exemptions I think are very rare. Okay. This is section A of the elevation certificate. It includes property description, the use of the building, its location in lat long, a diagram of the building, and if there are any engineered flood openings, it's specified in that section. Section B has the firm information, has the community name and number, has the effective dates, the location where the location via a map panel, and let's see what else is important to mention. Oh, it has the base flood elevation specified here, and whether it's in a COBRA zone or other protected area. Section C has information on the building itself. It has the top of the lowest floor, top of the next highest floor, other information. This section must be completed by a professional engineer, surveyor, or architect. The datum used for the elevation in section C, it needs to be reported in NGVD or NAVD. If it's different, a conversion must be supplied. And like I mentioned previously, if construction drawings are available, you'll include that as well, to specify all the information that's required here, like the top of the slab of the garage, lowest adjacent grade, highest adjacent grade, and other information. During the test, the elevation certificate is going to be provided to you, and this is a real helpful figure to help determine what is basically being talked about. So when they're saying C2A, that refers to this form right here, the top of the bottom floor. So C2B would be the next higher floor elevation. And this is the certification that is required. Any false statement may be punishable by a fine or imprisonment under 18 U.S. Code Section 1001. And that's stated here. The section needs to contain a signature. A stamp and seal is not required, but check with your local and state regulations. Comment section. This can be used to list the lowest lot elevation, top of curb elevation for zone A and AO.
Chris, if I may, this is one of the biggest areas of incomplete elevation certificate. If you look at the instructions, and there are, I don't know, 7 or 8 pages of instructions, you have to at least have what machinery equipment are you measuring under section C2. And we're looking for air conditioner, hot water heater, heat pump, elevator and its attendant utilities, and what am I missing? Air conditioner, hot water heater, furnace. So you have to have at least that in the comment section. And if you don't, it is an incomplete. And those of you who are CRS communities and have gone through, you know, recertification and they've reviewed your elevation certificates, this is one of the big areas that of errors that we see.
Thanks, Diane. Okay. Section E, this one is for the shallow flooding and zone 8. The ones without base flood elevations on the map. You're basically including dimensions and elevations of the building and reference to building plans. Okay, here's information about the property owner. The property owner certifies that all the information in the certificate is correct to the best of his knowledge or her knowledge. Community information is also included here in section G. It's meant to be completed by the community official. Okay, this section should be completed if the community wants to provide the base flood elevation to be used in the determination. Okay. Okay, here's some summary of all the acronyms and terminology. Letters of map changes, LOMAC. That's the overall encompassing things, and it includes LOMARs, letters of map revisions, letters of map amendments, conditional letters of map revision, LOMARs based on fill. Lowest adjacent grade is LAG. Oops. And finished floor elevation. Based on the finished floor elevations, elevation certificate is EC. Okay, this unit also contains.
If I may, Chris, this is that we have revised. We have a 2019.
Yes, I just noticed that.
Right, but there was no change in the actual filling out of the form.
Okay.
No change on that, just the date. The next one will have changes to I believe it's 2022, will have changes to the form. We just didn't have time with all of our hoops we have to cross to change the form to get the changes in there.
Okay. Like I said, we did have an exercise planned. Similar to Unit 3, I'll just go over the exercise. Let's see. Let me open up the form. Okay. Let's put this on this side. purpose of this exercise is to become familiar with the data and format of the elevation certificate. I'll just read what it says. A new family moved into the house next door. They find that you're a CFM and ask you if you can help them with the elevation certificate.
Chris, we're not seeing your slide.
Okay. All right. Hold on. Screen. Share. How's that?
Got it.
Okay, great. Okay, so your neighbor wants your help to fill out the EC. They provided you with a partially completed elevation certificate with a surveyor's elevation for this house. So you'll pull copies of the firm panel, the insurance study profile, the floodway data table from the map service center website. And all that information is located here below. Okay. So the first thing you would do is locate the property. It's specified as 1234 Corona Street in Englewood. So you go to the index. Oops, sorry. Figure out where exactly they are in the county. Figure out which map panel they're on, and then go to that map panel, and then specifically identify them on the map. So that's the information that you're putting here in section B. The map panel, the suffix name, the index, the effective date.
So I'm sorry to interrupt you again. You're missing in B1, you're missing the community ID number. So there's the city name, you got the community name, but there's also the
Yes.
CID number, and it is not incorporated in any recent maps in the map panel number like it used to be. So
Okay, so it's not this
Yeah.
085074.
that goes into B1.
Correct. Yeah, that's what's missing here.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on, let's see. Base flood elevations. Oh yeah, how to determine that? Well, first of all, which zone is it in? It is within, right on top of the zone AE marker, so it's obviously zone AE. It's located somewhere between 5346 and 5348. So we'll need to go to the profile, or the profile, to get a little more information on that. My computer is really lagging right now. But using the profile, you determine the elevation to be 5347.1, and that's based on the profile. You indicate that on B10. The profile, if this thing, it's referencing the datum as NAVD. So that's what you would put for B11. Is the building located in CBRS? No, there's no indication on the map panel that it is in a COBRA zone or OPA. So you can move on to the next section. This section requires information that's based in, come on, there's a picture provided along with this exercise that has the elevations that are going to be filled in here. Oh, come on. So, top of the bottom floor, that would be this teal colored number here, 5342.91. Top of the next highest floor, that would be this yellow one, 5350.04. The next C2C is associated with V zones. We are not in a V zone, so you can't answer that. There is no garage indicated in here, so you can't answer that one. The next one is the lowest elevation of machinery or equipment servicing the building. That one has a little blow up picture showing that there's an air compressor located at 5344.88. The lowest adjacent grade next to the building is right here, 5342.13. And the highest adjacent grade is this green value here, 5347.22.
And in those blank areas, you must have NA.
Okay, good point. There's one here that's not applicable, lowest adjacent grade at the at a deck or stairs. So that is not applicable. That's pretty much it for this exercise. That's the information that was requested, and they could come in the form of test questions. Are there any questions? Is anybody putting anything into the chat? I still can't find my chat.
No, we've got it pretty covered.
Okay, great.
The only thing is, can participants get a copy of this recorded presentation?
Yes.
Chris, can you put back section A in there?
Sure.
Because one of the things, if you've got, I know this is a little, using that particular building diagram, you really don't have an enclosure or a crawl space, but you have to look at when you get buildings on a crawl space, which might be a building diagram or an enclosure, building diagram 6, 7, 8, or 9. You're going to want to look and see if in A8 that you've got enough net openings to equal the size of that enclosure, or you use a different, you would use a different C2, you would use C2A as that would be the bottom of the crawl space or bottom of the enclosure. And that may not be what your intention is for that particular structure. Same thing, there wasn't a garage attached to this, but it would need to be the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Go down just a little bit. Go down just a little bit to A, section A. Okay, go to section A. A9, if you've got an attached garage and it's below the base flood elevation,
Mm-hmm.
then it's got to have openings, proper openings in there. So you'd need to have 425 square inches of net openings to equalize the water going in and out of that garage.
Right.
So
Okay.
there may be a question on proper openings, 1 square inch per 1 square foot used for parking, storage, and building access.
Yes, and I have seen that question on the
Yep.
test.
I had that question when I took it in 2000, so.
Mhm. Thank you for pointing that out.
Sorry to take 2 minutes.
That's all right. Okay, let me refresh my memory on the agenda.
So there's a question, can you go over section E? From Mark?
Okay.
And while you're doing that, hang on, for the lowest machinery and equipment elevation, if there is something inside the basement, would that count? Yes.
Building
நீ அங்க
coverage.
வேணா டிவி போட்டுக்கோ.
Okay. Section E is really not applicable to this exercise. It's
ஏன்
also
கூடாது?
crosstalk.
Somebody's talking. Can you please mute your phone?
Okay. Okay, we're a little bit behind on unit 5. I'd like to move on. Let me stop sharing. Stop the recording.